Welcome to Career Explorer Northwest Live. My name is Tina Swanek, and I'm the Career Explorer Northwest Live producer for KSPS PBS Public Television here in Spokane. Thank you for joining us today. Career Explorer Live is an interactive Zoom event that connects young people with professionals so they can learn about careers and career paths. And today we're going to be learning about electrician careers with the help of two special guests.
Morning, I'm Eric Hamlin at EWU.
Morning, Chase Bueller, EWU.
Okay, so Eric is on the left, Chase is on the right. Just real quickly, Eastern Washington University is a public polytechnic university which emphasizes hands-on learning and combines comprehensive academic education with practical experience. And Eastern's main campus is located in Cheney, Washington. Chase is EWU's Director of Facilities and Maintenance, and Eric is the high voltage lead electrician for the university. Chase and Eric, thank you so much for being here today. We appreciate all of your time, and we know you're very busy. So we appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedules to be with us.
Yes, thank you. We're happy to help.
Okay, and also joining us today, we have three schools. We have Mount Spokane High School with Counselor Josh Cowart. Give us a big wave. We have West Valley High School with K-12 Career Specialist Debbie Reeder. And then we also have Lakeside High School with Career and College Specialist Nicole Perry. Again, thank you all for joining us today. I just want to give you kind of a quick agenda of how this event is going to generally go today. First, Chase and Eric will give us each a real brief overview of their educational and career journeys. And then we'll open the floor to all of our student guests from the high schools that have joined today. And we won't be taking any questions through chat. We'll instead be engaging in this live discussion. Okay, so let's get started. Chase, will you tell us a little bit about your education and career journeys and maybe a little bit about your work as Director of Facilities and Maintenance at Eastern?
Yeah, sure. So after high school, I went in the United States Army. I was a track mechanic for 4 years. After I got out, I did a little bit of college and ended up kind of working general construction for a while. That kind of led me to the electrical trade. I ended up graduating with CITC of Washington, the non-union electrical apprenticeship program. I worked for a couple different companies here in Spokane, mostly AG Electric and Energized Electric. That brought me out to Eastern Washington University to be a maintenance electrician. After doing that for a little while, I ended up getting promoted to electrical lead. So I was in charge of the electrical shop. After just pretty recently, I got promoted to Director of Facilities Maintenance. So that's more of a trade management position. So I'm kind of in charge of all the shops, all the supervisors, budgets, and, kind of everything that goes on with facilities and maintenance sides of things here at Eastern.
A pretty impressive career journey, and actually a pretty fast track as well. So I look forward to hearing more from you in a bit as students ask questions about that journey and your experiences. Thank you again, Eric, for being here today. Would you also tell us a little bit about your career and educational journey and maybe a little bit about your work as a high voltage lead electrician for the
Yes,
school?
you're welcome. Thank you for having me. And thank you for your interest in the electrical field. I graduated from Colville High School in '97, and I attended EWU for 1 year as a student and had no idea what I wanted to do in life. And I quickly fizzled out here. And I luckily stumbled into the electrical field and started a 4-year apprenticeship with CITC of Washington, which was a non-union apprenticeship. I worked my way through that apprenticeship and completed it and had my journeyman license, became a foreman, and built high schools and hospitals in Washington, a lot in Spokane. And then I decided I wanted to try the utility business, and I worked for Avista Utilities for 4 years. And the last 2 years, I've been out here at EWU as a high voltage lead, maintaining our substation that feeds our 52 buildings.
Thank you so much, Eric.
Yeah.
What I especially really love about the fact that we have both of you on this event today, participating in this event today, is that you have some union and non-union experience. And so I think that's really great to be able to bring that to the students as well for those that have questions about those experiences. So now we'll go ahead and we'll move on to the question and answer portion of our event. And again, we won't be taking any questions through chat today. Students, before you ask your question, if you could just please introduce yourself with your first name only, that'll help Chase and Eric to know who they're speaking with. And also, if you could indicate which of them your question is for, that would be very helpful. So we'll start with a question from Lakeside High School, and then we'll follow with Mount Spokane, and then West Valley, and we'll continue with that order throughout the event. Lakeside High School, what is your first question?
I'm Marshall. I was wondering, what's the tool you guys use most often?
Currently, my computer. But, you know, out in the field, it varies quite a bit. We use benders here quite a bit. So this is a 1-inch bender. This was what we used to bend conduit. There's various sizes, 3/4, half-inch, different things like that. That's used quite a bit, actually. Here on site at EWU, we are less involved in construction. They're usually smaller projects, so we don't do that as much. On this side, we do more maintenance. So we use our fluke meter quite a bit. This is our fluke power analyzer here. We deal with this a lot. So it's like, on this end, we do a lot of power studies. So anytime we're dealing with adding circuitry or adding new panels or anything like that, we have to do power studies to turn into the state to show power quality, and the load for the transformer can support it and different things like that. But it's just kind of a formality to get to the state. So wire strippers a lot. I mean, it's really kind of it's a lot. So kind of varies depending on what phase of a project you're in.
Thank you. The next question will be from Mount Spokane High School.
I'm Cash, and I just what's a typical day like for you, Eric?
Cash, I'd say first thing I do is open my computer and I see what's going on around campus. And once I know what's going on around campus, I can assess what is most important. You know, if we have safety issues, that's what I want to take care of first. And then all the way down to aesthetics. You know, we've got 56 buildings and we want them to look nice and function nice, but safety is the most important aspect of any electrical trade.
West Valley.
My name's Tyler, and I just wanted to know for Eric, what's like a recommended education level that you could need? Like, what would be like the best possible, and what would be like recommended?
Tyler, you're gonna need to have a high school diploma or a GED to get accepted into any of these apprenticeships, and they're gonna want high algebra scores. I think they want a 80% minimum.
Yeah, I'm sure there's a lot of math that you do in the course of your work.
While attending Colville High School, I took carpentry classes and small engine classes, and I think those set me up really well to be in the trade. You know, working with metal and wood and hand tools, I think propelled me towards this career.
Lakeside.
Hi, my name's Charles. I have a question. Are you required to stay updated on new electrical technologies and codes?
Yes, we're to maintain our EL01 Washington licenses, we have continuing education that we're required to take. And I believe it's about 24 hours a year. And that keeps us current. We'll do code update classes. And that's a necessity.
Mount Spokane.
Hi, I'm Isadora Chambers. Chase, why did you choose to be an electrician over something else, like construction?
Honestly, I don't really know. I had some friends in the trade and they were electricians, and I was going to college at the time, and you know, living off of no money and a college, you know, I was on the GI Bill, so my income was very low. I was kind of getting burnt out on that. So I actually had a friend that was an electrician, and when he got hired on, he said he loved it. He was making money. The work was interesting. Something new every day. So that kind of appealed to me. I've always kind of been drawn to the trades in general. I like that kind of work. I like working with my hands. I like being outside. The electrical scope kind of drew me in as well because, you know, you're there from the beginning of site work to the very end, you know, from the dirt work to putting on plate covers at the very end of the building. So it's one of the largest, I guess, durations of trades that are on a job. You're there from the beginning to the very end to turnover. So those kinds of things always kind of appealed to me. And then, you know, the scope of work for this is pretty massive too. I mean, you heavy equipment operation, everything from, you know, heavy equipment operation to, you know, metal work, woodwork. It's pretty physical. I mean, yeah, I'd say those are probably the reasons why I was drawn to it.
Hey, West Valley.
My name's Stuart, and I have a question for Eric. Did you go into an apprenticeship, and what was the experience like from getting into the apprenticeship, from end to getting hired?
Thank you, Stuart. Yeah, I did actually 2 apprenticeships. My first non-union apprenticeship was 4 years, and it ranged from terrible to great. You know, day one, it's the kid came to work with a lunchbox and boots. Way to go. And you just progress and you build every day and be accountable and prove yourself. And at the end of it, you're a part of a team that can go out into a field and read survey stakes and trench, and a year later you're turning the lights onto the building. It's very rewarding. My second apprenticeship was a union apprenticeship through the IBEW Local 77, and that was through a Vista where we learned generation and transmission and distribution of bulk power.
Excited. Next question.
My name's Reggie. What are the best ways to gain experience as a new electrician, Chase?
Anything from school, you know, going to wood shop like Eric was talking about earlier, to working on stuff at your home. I don't know if your parents, you know, if you guys do any projects like that. I know with my kids, any remodel jobs I've done, I've been a part of that. I mean, really, until you get in an apprenticeship program, hands-on is any electronics classes, I guess. That's kind of a tough question because, I mean, live electrical is dangerous, so I wouldn't advocate for doing that without without some knowledge there. So, you know, I guess electronics classes and, you know, construction projects with your parents, if you guys do that kind of thing at your house, or any classes your schools offer. Some of these apprenticeship programs might have like where you're able to come and visit them prior to signing up.
Hey, Mount Spokane.
Hello, my name is Aiden, and Eric, what don't you like about being an electrician?
Aiden, I would say, as I had a wife and family later in my career, I didn't like to travel. You know, when you're building a new school, you're generally there for a year, and sometimes that's in Walla Walla or the Tri-Cities. So that wasn't always optimal. I would say, you know, to build a building, it takes a team, and when some aspect of that teamwork falls through, that can really grate on you, especially when you're trying to meet deadlines.
West Valley.
My name is Braden, and I'm just wondering what's the biggest challenge you face as an electrician, and that's for Chase.
I guess out here, it's just making things work. Out at Eastern, we have systems from like the 1960s to all the way to, I think we've had turnover for buildings last year. So I'd say the biggest challenge for us is, you know, sometimes walking into these older buildings or systems that are not supported as much and trying to find a way to make them work when they fail.
Lakeside.
I have a question for Eric. Would you suggest being a high voltage electrician 01 or specialist, given your past experiences?
That's a good question. There's about 14 different electrical licenses you can hold. Mine being an 01 allows me to work on the other 13 licenses. So I would recommend putting the 4 years in and getting the 01 license. And it'll open your eyes to all the different facets there are, from security to fire alarm to nurse call in a hospital to high voltage. So I would definitely recommend that O1 license.
Mount Spokane.
Chase, what advice would you give to your younger self before becoming an electrician?
Oh boy. I guess I would say start early. That was one thing I wish I started a little bit later. It's nice, some of the journeymen I knew that were pretty young kind of set themselves up better. Just starting early was a big positive for a lot of people. Don't be afraid to get in there and just do it. And, you can get through those types of things, and it's challenging, but definitely rewarding. And I would say start when you can.
West Valley.
My name is Micah. Eric, what skills or qualities do you think are essential to have for being an electrician?
Thank you, Micah. What skills? I think for me, organization and attention to detail. When you're a journeyman and your shop sends you out to build a building, they hand you this book that an electrical engineer has drawn. It's 1,000,000 pages with 1,000,000 words, and they're all very important. So for me to do my job properly, I have to know what needs to be done. So attention to detail and organization would be very high.
Lakeside.
It's a really dumb question. Any of you can answer. My name's Keely. But if you build a house or build a building and then something goes wrong with the wires or electric, it causes a fire, can you get sued for it?
I think if I was, say, like a residential electrician and I had a contracting license, I would be liable for that structure for a certain amount of time.
It also depends on negligence too. It'd be different if something failed from factory versus somebody with a negligent installation.
Mount Spokane.
What are some of your favorite things about being an electrician, Chase?
For me, it's just the scope of work. I really like being outside, and there's a lot of that when I worked commercial construction, and even here. I like being outside in the weather, dirt work, running equipment. I like that, you don't get kind of caught up in the same routine every single day. It's like you start doing something for a month and you're on to something else. It's a different part of the work. You're doing EMT, you're pulling wire. Things kind of go in phases. So if you don't like doing the same exact thing every day, which I don't, it's nice to be able to be like, well, we're done piping, so now it's time to start pulling wire. Or there's just something new, different phases. And that's probably what I like the most, just the change up.
It'd be interesting to have so much variety in your job.
Yeah.
West Valley.
I was wondering, right out of high school, what do you think the best steps would be to be able to become or go into the field?
I would tell you to decide if you wanted to be a union electrician or non-union electrician, and that will tell you who you need to reach out to. Like Chase was saying, your non-union path would be to reach out to the CITC, and they could give you the necessary information to become enrolled with them. The alternative would be to reach out to your local IBEW 73 or 77 if you wanted to go into utilities, and they could walk you through becoming a union apprentice.
Okay, Lakeside.
My name's Sam. I was looking at, or I am looking at going to Eastern next year for electrical engineering, and I just want a quick summary, I guess, Chase, of kind of what that program looks like, I guess.
I don't really know too much what that program looks like, honestly.
Okay.
Yeah, we have kind of limited interactions with students on the side. We actually just brought back our student worker program. So we have student workers working with all of our trade shops now. I think it's, kind of tying in with the Polytechnic side of the school. I know the CEP computer engineering building is probably where you'll be at mostly, and it's a super nice 4-floor building. Other than that, I don't really know what that entails.
Right. Also, is there what is the crossover between electrical engineering? As an electrical engineer, can you kind of know the same stuff as the normal just electrician?
Yeah, definitely. There's a lot of crossover. that's one thing we've always talked about in the field as field workers, that, we wanted engineers to have field time. It helps for like, to me, it helps in designing and building these buildings. So, we work here in-house, we work with a lot of the engineering firms out there, and, there's a lot of crossover between being a field electrician and a engineer.
Mount Spokane.
So what would be the best like school like for me to go to, and how much would that cost?
Thanks for the question. Yeah, CITC, there's been different state accredited schools here in Washington, and I know IEC, ABC used to be schools, but I don't know on the private side. Currently, CITC, I believe, is the only one in the area that I know of. And typically, there's money that comes out of your check between you and your employer that pays for that, and there's like a minor tuition up front. So I think when I was going through it, was like $1,500 or $2,000 per year, plus a little bit came out of your check between you and your employer monthly, and then there was some book costs and some stuff like that. I don't actually know. I didn't go through the IBEW and what that looks like with a non-union or with a union shop. So yeah, I mean, Eric might be able to speak to that better because he went through Local 77 there for part of his apprenticeship program.
The union apprenticeship I went through, there was no out-of-pocket expenses. You were just required to pay your union dues, which I think amounted to about $1,000 a year. And my non-union apprenticeship, like Chase was saying, there was no out-of-pocket expenses from that. That was kind of rolled into your wage package.
Part of the benefits, essentially.
Yes.
Okay. West Valley.
Oh, my name's Brandon. I was just wondering, what's the difference between union and non-union?
I would say, it seems like there's a lot of contention between union and non-union. When I was a commercial electrician for 15 years, I didn't see a huge benefit into being in a union shop. It seemed like the non-union shops in Spokane always had enough work and kept us busy, whereas maybe the non-union shops, they were on the books a lot and not at work. I would say that on the utility side, you're going to be union. And I can't say that I have anything bad to say about either side.
Can I add to that real quick?
Yeah.
So another big difference between union and private shop is union wages are kind of standardized. So no matter what you're working on, you're getting a set union wage. When you're in the private sector, you'll have a difference between prevailing wage and straight wage. So if you were on like a house or a gas station, typically you'd get a straight wage, which is usually substantially lower. And if you're on like a government project, like a school or something like that, you're going to get a prevailing wage, and it's based off of the union wage. So that's another big difference.
Lakeside.
Would you say you guys get paid hourly or annually?
I am currently paid on a salary, but where I was building high schools and hospitals, I was hourly. And if you're on a public project like a school that you're standing in, you can go to the Washington L&I website and it will post what your hourly rate will be based on the county that you're in. So like right now, an 01 in Spokane County is going to make $66 an hour. Whereas if you're in King County, you'd be at about $104 an hour.
Mount Spokane.
Hi, I'm Cash. What are some like advancement opportunities to like make more money?
I would just say, going through that apprenticeship program, big. You start out at 50% of a journeyman's wage, and then as you progress through that scale, and get your O1, you'll work your way up to 100% of a journeyman's wage. And then typically within a company, depending on the company's growth potential, you could work your way up to foreman pay. That comes with different perks, vehicles and gas. And here at like a maintenance position, you know, you've got the ability to work from an O1 to a lead to a supervisor. I worked up to director. So there's opportunities kind of wherever you go.
Okay, West Valley.
What do you wish you knew before you kind of got into the field, like way back earlier? What do you think is something you wish you did?
I don't know. I guess maybe just the scope of the work. It was a lot more intense than I anticipated. Kind of going into electrical, I thought it was going to be, you know, light bulbs and outlets and making up wires and screwdriver, and it's a lot more physical than I anticipated, and a lot more demanding. You're out in the heat and out in the snow and the rain, and you know, it's not, you know, you hear things about certain trades getting sent home if there's inclement weather. That doesn't typically happen. I've never been sent home, so you're out in the cold and the rain. You just got to get the job done, and you know, that's something I wish I would have known, just that how demanding it can be.
Lakeside.
Like, what states are you guys licensed in? Like Idaho or like Montana, just Washington? And like, do you have O2s or just O1s in those states?
I'm licensed in Washington and Idaho. Washington reciprocates with other states. I don't know what those states are, but there's a handful of them where my Washington license is good. Chase might know that answer.
I'm also just Washington and Idaho, but yeah, I believe Oregon reciprocates, and I'm not sure about Montana right now, but I thought they did. I can't give a good answer on that.
Mount Spokane.
What is a typical vehicle that you guys use most often?
In my current job, in my current job, I don't have a vehicle. I walk kind of everywhere. I'm kind of a more administrative position now, so I kind of walk everywhere. Eric has a current shop vehicle. I'll let him speak on that.
You know, on the outside building schools, we had 1-ton trucks. We're pulling trailers, and we're hauling excavators and skid steers. At a Vista, you had a CDL and you were driving a bucket truck or a tanker truck for oil. And currently around campus, we use service vans because we're dealing with anything from a large project that requires piping, pulling, and terminating, or just resetting an elevator. So a service van out here works well for us.
Eric, did you have to pay for your own CDL, or did your employer pay for that?
Vista took care of the CDL costs.
Okay.
And that was about 6 weeks of training, 40 hours a week.
Okay, thank you. West Valley.
My name is Stuart, and I got a question for Chase. What are the demands for being an electrician?
I know currently it's a very high demand trade. I think most trades are. I believe, you know, you hear, I mean, I don't have any solid statistics, but you hear that a big chunk of the workforce is getting ready to retire right now, and that not as many people are coming in. So it looks like it's going to be a electricians market. You know, there's going to be a big demand for electricians, and you know, you kind of see that in the outside world. Here it's a little different. You know, we kind of have a static number of people that are here, and we keep that shop number kind of the same. So the outside world, that fluctuates, and you notice that they're starting to have a harder and harder time finding good electricians and good tradespeople. So it's probably a good and in-demand job.
Okay, I think we have time for one more question from each of the schools. So we'll start with Lakeside.
What would you say, either one of you, is your favorite job, and what makes it your favorite?
I always like layout. I like using a tape measure and space, and using construction documents to come up with the highest quality, most aesthetically pleasing product. So that was what I enjoyed most.
And I'd say I always liked dirt work. That was my favorite thing to do, site work. Get out on a backhoe or a mini or a skid steer, installing all that.
Mount Spokane.
My name is Josh. I'm curious about the heavy equipment operation you keep talking about. Is that something that was kind of woven into the apprenticeship, or did you learn those skills separately?
I learned those separately. Heavy equipment operation, it was not in my apprenticeship program. So I kind of learned some of it through the Army and then some of it through various jobs on the outside. And then that kind of translated into when I was an apprentice. They didn't have somebody that knew how to run equipment. I knew how, so they'd always kind of throw me up on there, and it kind of just always ended up being something I did and really enjoyed.
West Valley.
Tyler, I was just wondering, like, how many hours do you guys normally work, usually like weekly? And how many of those hours would be at like a computer normally?
I currently work 40 hours a week, and I spend probably 2 hours a day on a computer figuring out what needs done and accounting for my time.
Yeah, on my days, probably I'm a salary employee, so my hours are usually 40 to 50 right now, and about half my day is spent on a computer. Here at Eastern, we have quite a bit more computer time. We use CMMS software for managing all of our time, costs, and just managing projects.
Great. I think we're getting, again, close to the end of our event here, but I'd like to give Chase or Eric or both of you opportunity to let us know if there's anything else you'd like the students to know about being an electrician that you think is important for them to know as they're choosing their career paths. Anything we haven't covered today that you think is important for them to share with them?
From my standpoint, I would recommend being an electrician. I love the fact that, my wife's a teacher and I'm an electrician. We literally could go anywhere and do our work. And it's challenging and rewarding. If you're bored, you just pivot and go to the next electrical field. Like Chase said, if you're bored of roughing in, the next step is to pull wire. If you're bored of pulling wire, your next step is to terminate. And a year later, you can stand back and be prideful of the building you built and move to the next one.
Yeah, I'd say, I guess, looking back when I was younger, a 4-year duration seemed like a very long time. Dedicating 4 years to something when you're, 16 to 18 years old seems like a large amount of time, but as you get older, you realize that 4 years isn't that long, and becoming an electrician has been great for me and my family, and all my friends that are electricians have had good careers and stable. So sticking with something like a 4-year apprenticeship program with an electrical contractor or with an electrical program is a great option. That's kind of one thing I'd stress. The time goes by very quickly.
Okay, thank you both so much. We're at the end of our event today. I just wanted to take a quick moment to again thank Eric and Chase for being here today and for spending so much time and sharing a wealth of information and experience with our students. And thanks once more to Nicole Perry and the students from Lakeside High School, Josh Cowart and the students from Mount Spokane High School, and Debbie Reeder and the students from West Valley High School for participating in today's event. We appreciate you taking time and being here.
Thank you for inviting us.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. That concludes this Career Explore Live event.